Good morning, first graders. We've been working on characters and setting. Characters include who is in the story. The setting is when and where the story takes place. The past 2 days, you have been thinking about how you can infer information from the pictures to determine the characters and setting. Yesterday, we read Flip and Flop. On Tuesday, we read Maisie Goes Camping. And today we're going to read Asha in the Attic. Tomorrow you are going to practice you're going to practice finding the characters and setting in just one book, and you're going to write about the characters and setting. So today you're still going to be drawing a picture, but tomorrow you're going to be doing something a little bit different. I just want to get your brain ready for that. Okay, so today we're reading Asha in the Attic. As we read, I want you to think about who the characters are and what the setting is of this story. Okay. Asha loved Grandpa's attic. It wasn't just big and dusty and full of stuff from the olden days. Most attics are like that. Grandpa's attic was special because of the stories Grandpa told there. Once, while she was exploring, Asha found an old school bag. Grandpa's eyes lit up when he saw it. "Now that reminds me of a story," he said, and he told Asha about the pet rat he took to school one day. Another time, it was a medal. "This story is scary," he warned her, "also a bit sad." Grandpa told her about a friend of his who was hurt in the war. Asha listened to every word. Best of all, though, was the pile of baby clothes. "Your mom wore these, Asha," Grandpa grinned. "I could tell you a story or two about her. Once she threw all my tools in the pond to see how deep it was." Asha laughed and laughed and laughed. Who can you infer that is from the picture? Let's look. "I could tell you a story or two about her," Asha's mother. "Once she threw all my tools in the pond to see how deep it was." So we can infer from that picture, there's a girl by a pond with tools. We can infer that that is Grandpa's memory of Asha's mother. By now, she couldn't wait for her next visit to the attic. What would she find when she got there? And what story would it jog in Grandpa's memory? Only one thing bothered her. "Grandpa," she asked quietly, "do you think—" "Yes, Asha?" "Do you think you'll ever—" "Go on, my dear." "Well, do you think you'll ever tell a story about me? Here in the attic, I mean." "Here?" asked Grandpa with his eyebrows raised. "In the attic?" Asha nodded. Grandpa scratched his head. "I'm bound to eventually," he said, "but you may have to be patient." Asha. After all, everything in this big, dusty attic comes from the olden days. There's nothing olden dayish about you." Poor Asha. She didn't want to be patient. She wanted to be in one of Grandpa's stories now. Then she had an idea. Suppose she hid Owen, her stuffed owl, in Grandpa's attic, and suppose she pretended to find him in some far corner. Grandpa would have to tell an Asha story then, wouldn't he? So while Grandpa was snoozing out in the sun, Asha crept back into the house. She tiptoed up and up the stairs right to the top of the house. "There's a door to the attic, Owen," she said. "Let's shut it tight so Grandpa won't see where I'm hiding you." Now, for the first time ever, Asha had the attic all to herself. Slowly, she turned around. It had never looked so big or so dusty or so full of stuff from the olden days. It had never looked so lonely either. Asha felt a shiver along her spine. "I can't leave you here, Owen," she whispered. "I'm not sure I can stay here myself." How do you think Asha feels right now? What can you infer from the picture in her face and what it said in the story? Asha felt a shiver along her spine. I can't leave you here, Owen, she whispered. I'm not sure I can stay here myself. How do you think she feels? She turned to leave and found the door was stuck. Asha tugged it and jiggled it and kicked it as hard as she could. She shouted, too, at the top of her voice. But the door stayed stuck. What could Asha do? Grandpa can't hear us, Owen, she said. These old floorboards are so thick. We must be patient until he realizes where we are. Don't worry, we'll share some stories to pass the time. Luckily, Asha knew lots of stories. She settled down to tell them on Grandpa's old sofa under the skylight. First came the school bag story, then the stories about the baby clothes. After this, Asha began the story of the medal. It's scary, Owen, she warned, also a bit sad. Suddenly, Asha heard a strange noise. It was a sneaky, creaky skylight opening noise. A dark figure loomed overhead. Was a burglar breaking in? Asha shrank back in alarm. Don't be frightened, Owen, she gasped. It's only Grandpa! He'd come to rescue Asha, of course. Now that he was inside the attic, he soon loosened the door. Afterward, he sat on the sofa with Asha and Owen. What a brave pair you are, he said. Plenty of people would have panicked, you know. Would you like to hear my new story? It's called Asha in the Attic. Can I tell it, Grandpa? Asha giggled. Grandpa let her, of course. Asha loved Grandpa's attic. Okay, so in this story, Asha explores an attic that she had been hearing stories about throughout her life. In this story, the characters are Asha and her grandpa. The main character in this story is Asha because that's who the story is mostly about. The setting of the story is mostly the attic. As you're working on your activity today, there's a new choice board, so make sure that you watch the next video so that you know what all those choices are. And on the bottom, it gives you a challenge. The challenge says on the back of the paper, write what you think the moral of the story is. Whenever I ask you to say what the moral of the story is, I mean the lesson or what the book was trying to teach you, or maybe what the main character learned throughout the story. We're going to be working on this more next week, but I just want to see where you all are at and if you know what the moral of the story is. And if you don't know, you don't have to do that part because that's just a challenge, and challenges are optional for this activity.